Can everybody see this with reasonable viewing? Fine. The LD, line of demarcation, bang, bang, crash. Now, let's put below the line, which again is the area of the knowns, remember? Let's put a big mass of disorganized stuff, and that disorganized stuff is human thought. You would be amazed the depth of disorganization that you find in it when you view it from another perspective. Be that as it may, with all the stuff that you know of which humans think and the mix of it, that radiates out, wham, 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 whip, like that. And there is an inverse square law at work, I hope, but we're not sure. On the other side of the coin is that eternal M field that comes down through here like this and radiates through there. Now, a funny thing has happened on the way to the store, as it were, where we, us, how and why did we get here? This is the thing that is a subject of great curiosity, to say the least. Well, let's take a typical one, but not the most important one. Here, we are moving along here, and boing, we hit that part of that radiation, and we smell it, taste it. What's that? So we move in a little lever over here to another, and we get another taste of it. You say, you know, that's real interesting. I wonder what that is and what that's like. So you're trying to figure a way where you can move in here because it's getting pretty strong stuff and sticky and this kind of thing. So you're very cautious. And at that particular moment, as you're contemplating, you're perceiving all this in here with great curiosity. All of a sudden, this big man, that's a misnomer, a he-she, that's more like it, appeared and said, what do you want? And you say, oh, well, what's that down there? He says, that's humans. And you say, well, can I go closer? And he says, well, not unless you be human. You say, well, I'll be human. He says, you what? He says, well, I'd like to be human. And he says, well, I suppose you could if you really wanted to. And you say, well, how do I do it? He says, well, just call me Ed, incidentally. I'm the entry director, and just so you can call me Ed for short. You say, oh, yes, Ed. Okay. He says, the first thing you have to do in order to be human, you say, oh, don't misunderstand. I just want to get a taste, a sample, and zoom in and zoom out. That's all. I don't want to stay there. Oh, no, I wouldn't think of staying there. That's just a taste. You know, just a little sip. And Ed looks at you and says, yes, I understand. So what you do in that process, he says, the first thing that you need to do in order to be human is recognize that time-space exists. You say, well, somehow I perceive it. There it is. He says, well, what you perceive is only part of it. There's a lot more to it than that. And you say, well, I'll take my chances. He says, well, the other part is that you have to recognize that when you become human, that you have an important thing you must do in order to be human. You say, oh, what's that? He says, well, you have to have shut off all of your present memory and your present self. Otherwise, you can't generate this human consciousness. You say, oh, sure, I can pick it up when I get out. And he says, yeah. And he says, the other thing is that you are really on your own, because that's what that is down there, is that people are on their own. Those who come in and become human make supposedly their own decisions. You say, oh, I'll make my own decisions. He says, yeah. So he says, now, if you really want, we can set it up. You say, oh, sure, I got to go. He says, All right, first thing you got to do is, what do you want? Do you want to be male or female? And you look and say, what's that? He says, never mind. He says, can I select for you? Oh, yeah, you tell me which way. All right, fine. He says, the next thing is that you have to make a decision of where you want your entry point is. And he says, that's a decision that you have to make, because there are kind of problems. He says, for example, on Park Avenue in New York, there's a wait list line, a long wait list line to get there. Can't get Marin County, California, long line, that kind of stuff. And he says, Beverly Hills, almost impossible. But he says, we got plenty of fast takers, say in Africa, instant service, you can get in right away. South America, the same thing, easy, no problem. And he says, and I can just really rig it. And you say, well, that first one, it sounds pretty interesting, but you say it's waitlisted. He says, yeah, Park Avenue, forget it, but in New York. He says, and you say, but if it's New York, and it's close to that wait listing, isn't there any place in New York I can get in? And he thinks this is, yes, I can get you in, as a matter of fact, pretty quickly. Just right now, just wait and see. You see, that's fine, you're right. He says, all right, you got to be careful now. Remember, you're on your own. He says, oh, I can make it. So he says, okay, you agreed, sign the contract. He says, okay, fine. Click, I sign. So he takes you, and he goes, Coon! And you go, bang. And at that bang, you look very closely, if one were there, and they would see a little newborn baby squalling and screaming, not hearing the screams to let me out of here, but just a screaming baby, newly born, lying in the broken glass, the garbage, and the dust and the dirt on the landing of a fifth-floor walk-up in the Bronx, while the 13-year-old mother, having just given birth, is hurrying down the stairs to get away. And so one begins life here. The thing that happens after that is where the action really starts. You go through that life process, and the symbology can have been 100,000 years ago. The whole symbology is still the same. And you make your exit, and you start out again. Now, originally, your intent was to take your escape velocity and go on out and continue wherever you were intending to go or whatever you intended to do. But right about here somewhere, you begin to bend a little bit. And the reason is that as you made this process through here in what we call physical life, you picked up a greater load factor than you realized. Unconsciously, you picked up that load factor, and you had friction, which slowed you up. The combination of those two is expressed in the bending of that, where you, no one else, no law, nothing else, makes the decision when you said, how many times, I got to go back. It's just something I wanted to do, and I didn't get a chance to do it. I wanted to have 5 children instead of 2, and I got to go back and have 3 more children, or some such thing. Or I never got to drink alcohol. I'd like to go back and drink some booze. Whatever the reason. And you say, oh, just say to yourself, just once, that's all, and then I'll go on my way. And so you begin that turn to make just once more, one little more run, just one more for the road or whatever. And at that moment, that decision, which was yours and no one else's, no law, no rule, just you lost your escape velocity. And you went into orbit in this area. And you went down and around again. Had another life. And as you came out of that, you still were, as in essence, above this line. So you were recognized still from whence you came. You came up around in here and you made another decision. Having lost more velocity, having picked up an additional load factor, you're here. And you say, oh, it won't hurt to go back once more. And I've always wanted to ride a camel. So you decide to go back and ride and own a camel. So round you go again and go through the process here. And again, you are steadily losing velocity and your orbit is decaying, as you can see. Once you get below this line of demarcation, as it were, you're thinking more about here than you are about there. Your memory of you as you originally were is declining because of the overwhelming input from this human radiation. So down you go again for another life, another one, another one, another one, until you get to this point where you're locked in and you have little, even in between life sojourns, you have little, if any, perception of this radiation from whence you came. There's a word for that, which I probably have already used, that fits it very, very accurately. And that word is, we all have become human junkies. We're addicted to being human and the human experience. Whether that was a part of the original design, you can have your own conjecture about that. But that is fact. If you want to prove it, that's the point. You have the ability, growing right now, to begin to prove these things to yourself. No one else can tell you. You can prove it to yourself. So, that's the first point of entry. There are other ways that entry takes place up here. One of the more amusing ones, and you will begin to perceive these in other people. That's the fun part. One is what is called, or what used to be called, a remittance man. If you remember in the colonial empire where they had a black sheep in London of a noble family, and he was just embarrassing the family tremendously by his bouts of whatever. And so the family shipped him off during colonial empire days, say to New Zealand, Australia, Singapore, and remitted money to him monthly to keep him there, to pay him to stay away from London and the embarrassment of his presence. What happens here, it's very interesting. We will find other people, other beings, non-human, making an entry here, and they have all the appearance of having been paid to be here, and they don't really want to be here, but they've been paid here to be here because of the fact that someone sent them here and paid off to get them here. Another form of it that's equally interesting is the one that has such profound merit is the being who appears to be on the run from some other energy system, and he's looking for a place to hide. He's got to hide somewhere. And he spots this and says, oh, that's great. Wham, and goes in. And here are the guys after him, who can be the old version of the KGB or whatever after him. And what he doesn't know when he makes that dive is that every time he exits and ends a life sojourn, he again is over here. And when he does that, these pursuers are ready to grab him and say, gotcha. The other thing that makes it even worse is that when he sleeps at night, in that, you're right on the edge of it, in that past 21 era, and he's sleeping and he drifts out there, they're ready to grab him right now because he's far enough out of phase with his physical body. He's a good target, and they want to grab him. And so he has these horrible nightmares all his lifetime trying to not to sleep. He becomes deathly afraid of sleeping. And he becomes much, much more afraid of dying because that means the boys will really gotcha when he dies and take him back for whatever reason. Then there's the other types, of course, that in turn are the missionary types who perceive all of this roiling mass of disorganization and want to do something about it. You could say they're a super form of do-gooders, but they come to fix it, help it. And so they come in here, and they in turn the price of losing their memory, their personality, but they still try to express it. And most, if not all of them, become enmeshed in this whole cycle themselves, forgetting all about what the real motive was to help, and they get boozed up themselves. Then the other part, of which one that I'm very familiar with, is where a friend of yours gets enmeshed, and you go in then to retrieve your friend, to rescue your friend, and you too get enmeshed. More common than you think. Most importantly, the real, I'll put it in our modern jargon, the most attractive advertising for this being human, bar none, and which attracts most, if the highest percentage and the majority of those who come to be human, is to meet a graduate of this particular compressed learning school. A graduate of the being human experience is, I have to be unequivocal about it, is a God in other energy systems. And you have to think of it that way. Is a God in, as we term God, put it that way. And remember, our concepts of God from one perspective is very much local traffic type of perception. But there it is that that's once you meet a graduate of this particular system, truly a graduate, then in turn you, and probably have, said to yourself, I will do anything 1,000 times, 100,000 times, whatever, if I can be like that graduate. And that's exactly the important thing. Because a graduate is much on the order of what we perceive to be a super something. And the availability of that being and where those graduates go and be is something that we will not get into tonight, but it becomes obvious that they are no longer interested in local traffic. So I can just hear the radiation of all of you as you're saying, well, what about us? Where are we? Are we locked in? Wrong. You are those, and I can give you a number of different descriptions, and you can figure out the acronym when I say you're the SAers, S.A.ers, who have begun the recycling, where you in turn have begun to work yourself out more and more. In other words, you're on your way out. You have begun to achieve a deeper and deeper orbit. That's who you are. Step by step, laboriously, lifetime after lifetime, you have begun to accumulate or re-establish escape velocity. My best guess, and it's only a guess because it's so hard to measure, that most gateway graduates are up in here sometime. In other words, they are on the verge not of achieving escape velocity, but way up here on what I call the last timer role. I see you as those who, when they make their exit from this sojourn, this time will get into this last sojourn spot of contemplation or thinking about what will be my last run in You are a last-timer to be. So what that role is that you will play for the last time is something that you will decide, not now, but where you are in this contemplative, non-physical state. And I might add that some have stayed there for thousands of years. And I say that in a very funny way because that is out of time, but by our concept, they would have stayed there for thousands of years.